Welcome to the Leadership and Love podcast. We will cover leadership, mindset, personal development, and sales and marketing. You will experience thought-provoking conversations with both nationally and internationally recognized leaders. Our goal is to inspire you and deliver actionable items that you can implement that are going to help you accelerate your growth. Get ready to discover the magic and the power when you lead with love.
I'm very, very excited today. I've got not only a dear friend, but also my boss, Bruce Cameron here. Bruce Cameron is currently retired, and we're going to get to that in a second. But in his retirement, he's started, and you might have started it before you retired, Bruce, but he started a thing called the Vintage Swing Band, kind of as a side project hobby in his basement that's turned into just a really going concern. And can you tell the audience just a brief kind of background of what you did and how long you were doing it?
Sure. So I went to engineering school. I don't exactly know why. I was really good at mechanical drafting in high school. Mechanical engineering kind of sounded like that. I was good in math, so I got into a decent engineering school. I was in a 5-year co-op work-study program, and unfortunately, there was no sales programs in engineering. So I graduated engineering school. I immediately went for my MBA. Then I started moving around in the computer world back in the mid to late 70s, early 80s. You went with the wave. What was the product? Was it business software? Then it turned out to be engineering software. Then it turned out to be manufacturing software. I did a lot with robotic software back in the aerospace days, back in the 80s. And then where should you live to sell this kind of stuff? Well, I lived in LA, and that was all aerospace. I lived in Dallas, that was all oil and chemical. I lived in Cincinnati, and unfortunately, that was too small a city to have a lot of companies that I wanted to work for. So we moved to Chicago, which is very diverse, and for me, was the right place for me to be, although I'm a New Yorker and never really thought much of Chicago. But as far as a career, international companies set their headquarters up in Chicago. Chicago is the center of attention and for US-based companies, this kind of thing. And I've been able to change jobs. Sometimes when I knew it wasn't the right job, I changed pretty quickly. But I had 2 really good runs. Each was about 8 or 9 years. Did a lot of hiring of salespeople. The other thing that probably is my claim to fame, I'm a big fan of vertical selling. What is that? I don't want to be everything to everybody. I want my sales force to be experts in certain industries that my customers are in. The industries we had chosen were service management, companies that service product, or apparel. Most people that are selling into stores and manufacturing companies, everything is SKU based. Well, apparel is not SKU based. So you have your size, your color, your style of the product. No software back in those days could do it. I'm competing against SAP and Oracle, some of the big guys. And I had a development group in Chicago that we developed a lot of the software extensions for this stuff. And then I would just give it to my partners as far as their ability to sell the product. But we do the documentation, so we sell our core product. But vertical selling, as far as developing your relationship with your customer, so you can talk to our beta customer in apparel was Jockey Menswear. And we had a team that went in there and understood their business and how they account, what kind of margins they get, and this kind of stuff. So we had about 5 different verticals. It really distinguished us from the pack. So to me, the ability for a company to really know what they're good at and then focus on that, and then just stay with your knitting. Talk to customers, prospects in that area, that want that kind of product. They're going to get so much more trusting of you because you're talking their language and you understand what they're going through. And my home company at JBA was in the UK, and UK did not like all the development we're doing because they had to develop in the UK. That's just the way they were. But there was some major differences with the user interface between the UK. The languages are different, and but they started understanding what we were doing, and it got copied all over the world. And so most of the
I'm sorry to interrupt, Bruce, but what were you doing that got copied around the world?
so I would develop apparel software. We'd package it up, and then the other regions for that company, I'd say, "Kate, come to Chicago, and we'll get you trained up." And literally, we were in essence the product development group for these vertical industries. So when I say we give it around the world, I'm saying we give it to all the other divisions of my company to
Right,
expand their
right, right,
product offering. And
right. And when you say, and I want to be clear for our
yeah,
audience, when you're talking about vertical, that in my world, that's niche, a niche
correct,
market. You're
correct,
talking about exactly your vertical is the same thing as a niche market.
exactly. And it's funny when you learn some basic things early on in one's career, whether you retire or it's 30 years later, you'll go back to those basics. It's hard to keep the newness, if you will, after about 5, 6, 7, 8 years. In fact, our band, we're going on our sixth year at this point in time, and I'm looking, how can we breathe new life in this? In fact, we've started a smaller band called the Combo, and we're expanding. Instead of 20s to 40s, we're going 40s to 70s, and try to get a new niche and create differentiation between the two bands and things of that sort. So I'm no, if I had to define my career, um my leadership style is it's kind of soft spoken. I'm 6'8" back in the day, so I didn't need to be a big loudmouth, and usually I'm not. There are times when uh, if somebody's just not treating us or whatever fairly, it's always good to have a temper when you need it. But to me, the most important thing is to get to know my people. In a sales organization, the other term I use is a poster child. You got to find that guy that's going to break the bank, because that's the guy that you want your new guys interviewing with. Because if he can break the bank, and I got a similar background to him, I can break the bank, kind of thing. My sales organization, the largest, was about 100 guys. It's important to hire that first uh, person that's just going to do extremely well. And sometimes with that person doesn't come all the other qualities you might be looking at. It's tough in a sales organization because it's really easy to define what they're interested in. It's money, um, pure and simple. Now in a band, we the little bit we pay, people are not coming to band practice every other week and doing 15 to 20 gigs for anything other than pure enjoyment of music. It's a volunteer situation, and they're managed differently, and it's up to us to determine, what's the expectations. We have a leadership team. I have an organizational structure in the band, and people look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I actually don't even play much in my own band. I'm more of the kind of the leader of, I do the contracts and a lot of that, and the recruiting, that kind of stuff. But you know, it's important that each leader has 6, 7, 8 guys, because if you have more than that, it's hard to really get to know somebody and know what's going to make them tick and this kind of stuff. And when you got some of your top guys, you don't want to get too far away from them. The other thing that I think is extremely important, certainly in a sales organization, I wanted to be that sales guy, the sales leader, the general manager, the president, that my guys were very, very comfortable bringing me in. I don't want to be on center stage. I want my guys to be on center stage. Um, I consider myself one of the best sales guys I'd ever met, but I made a lot more money when I had a lot of sales guys reporting to me doing extremely well. And it's about 29, 30 years old. I'm kind of thinking, man, these other guys I'm with, and some of our partners, Microsoft and some of them, they're doubling what I make. What the heck is going on here? And being the best sales guy, to me, is not near as important as being the best leader and finding the right guys of character. I don't care how good a musician or how good a salesman they are. When they turn cancerous, you're not going to fix it. You don't have the time, and you're going to lose other people along the way. And we've had a couple situations like that in the band and any organization, but it comes down to um, just really paying attention to the people aspects of any business to understand what's going on. I had one of the things I like when I hire a top-notch sales guy, I ask them to write down the biggest W-2 that they've ever had. And they put in a piece of paper, and I say, okay, this is our goal. We got to beat this together. And I had one organization, and I was still pretty young as a manager. I was in mid-30s. I had some guys pulling down 700-800 grand. And the other part of this is ego control. I had no idea. I thought all these guys wanted to make a lot of money. No, well, that wasn't exactly true. They didn't know what to do with a lot of money. So they started stepping out on their families and their wives, and their drinking and their gambling. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And I actually did a lot of studies on ego control, because that, you know, there's nothing worse than building a tremendous organization. And I look at like the 1 year the Bears won it all. That was the last time they won. I think it was in '85. And I think a lot of it was those guys, they got out of, their egos got out of control. And you look at the great teams like a Green Bay under Lombardi, and some of those Belichick's teams. They don't even have their names on their back. Everybody's an equal. The team is as good as the weakest link, and I firmly believe in that. That you know, you gotta, if you're going to be a team for the long term. And again, long term in these days is 5-6 years, but not a one-hit wonder. It's extremely important that you build up the ego, but you don't let the ego get out of control. And
That's interesting. I've recently been watching some highlights of the '85 Bears. It's funny that you bring that up. And one of the things that I noticed is it didn't matter who made a play. Everybody surrounded that player and congratulated him,
yes,
right? And they were all, to your point, they didn't have, they were proud of what they were doing together. They weren't, it wasn't all about me, and that ego. You've got some great wisdom in what you've been talking about, because there is a fine line, right? We want to build people up, but we don't want to get so egotistical that they think we can't live without them,
yep,
because nothing's further from the truth. Anybody can be replaced. One of the other things I thought that was very powerful that you touched on was the fact that once they had that that fame and fortune, if you will, they didn't know how to handle it, right? And that power and fame went to their head, and is much like a rock star, right? Or great musicians that get there, but they don't know what to do with it, and they turn to the, like you said, they step out on their wives, excuse me, they turn to alcohol or drugs, those kinds of things, and then the whole thing goes off the rail, and it really literally implodes. I'd also like to say that I've done some leadership where I've gone into teams like for other companies, and it's amazing to me how one person, one person can suck an organization down. That one bad apple can suck a whole organization down. It's incredible. And you're right. Again, you had a bunch of golden nuggets in there, Bruce. And one of them is that, once you've identified that person, you've got to get them out of the organization as quick as possible, because they're going to take good people down with them. If not the whole organization or that whole department.
there's no question that.
You and I have had some very um, I call enlightening conversations over the last couple of years since I've been privileged to join the band. And you said something about the caliber of the person being more important to you than their skills. I'd like you to talk about that to our audience, um, to get us going right off the bat, so that they have an understanding of what you mean by that.
Sure. So, when you're building an organization, whether it be a sales organization or a band or raising four sons, you want to instill or find people of character. And what that means in my mind is somebody that always kind of thinks in terms of the whole piece, the whole band, the whole organization, as opposed to just their personal success. Someone that has empathy, not only for their co-worker, but in my mind, the most important empathy anybody has is for the customer. Understanding what the customer wants. It doesn't really matter what you're selling. Sometimes the leader, his customer, is his subordinate. But uh, I look for that person that's going to fit the organization, and then hopefully, in a band, they're also a very good musician. You, as an example of this, came into a jazz band with not a lot of jazz experience, but the type of person you were, and there's a couple other guys in the band like this, uh, did not want to be the weak link in the organization. And you worked very, very hard. And the neat thing was, as you were getting better, everybody felt that they needed to get better, even though a lot of the guys were really good musicians, because it's that it's that character of Louie Sharps and other people that kind of move the organization ahead to the next level. And that's what I mean when I talk about character. I have four sons. I talked about them. Obviously, I didn't hire my sons, but the oldest son had to set the stage. He had to be that person that in essence was the leader. I was the oldest in my family. I have three siblings, and although they live back in New York, they know that I always operate in the best interest of the family or the organization or whatever. So when I talk about that and when I interview people, and that's not to say I always get it right, but that's probably in my mind the most important asset is the character of the person, their work ethic, their ability to be part of a team and understand what that means, and also help me. Um, this organization, the band, is much further along than my original thought process as to what it was going to be and that kind of stuff. And I need future thinkers. And there's nobody better that came into a band that didn't even really play the same music that we were playing, and got through that hurdle, but helped me a lot to get myself and the band to the next hurdle. There's three or four people in the band that I call them the glue. None of my glues are my best musicians, but they're the guys that basically keep us comfortable. They're loving what they do. They know that they can speak up and say their piece. They come here for 2 hours every 2 weeks, really as it's almost like a breath of fresh air to get out of the world. Some of us are retired, but a lot of us they come to this for those 2 hours, make great music together, and know that they're gonna feel good during the process.
So you touched on something that I think is a truly golden nugget, Bruce. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that, and that is that sometimes as a leader, your number one client are the people under you. Can you help our audience understand what you mean by that?
So my whole life I've been selling what I would call continuous improvement. Happens to be the product of software, but we're trying to make our clients better and better. And one of the first things I do with a client is I truly try to understand what their goals are, where they want to be 5 years from now, what their expectations are, and things of that sort. To me, that's the exact same interview I'm going to have with a client, with a prospective employee. What is your goals? So many people, you ask them for their 5 year goals and they have no idea. They're there in their minds to start a job. And I don't want someone starting a job. I want someone that's going to be part of my team for a minimum of 5 years, and that we're going to do a lot of building together. And a lot of people just don't think that way. And the other thing I do very, very different than most, which I think is incredibly important. Once I tell people my 5-year goal. Then I work backwards from this is where I want to get to, and these are the steps I got to go through. To me, the same thing with managing a sales organization. The final step in my mind is who signs the purchase order? When can that happen? Does he have the authority? I could care less about the demos and how many sales calls and how many lunches. And gosh, I got to play golf with him and all this kind of stuff. Tell me what that last meeting looks like. And it's almost like in our band, help me understand what is the audience going to feel when they hear this song and it's finally done perfectly at that point in time. We had a Christmas concert and we worked on a song, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It probably was written by one of the toughest arrangers. His name is Gordon Goodwin, probably a bit beyond our band. But each year we took it out, we played it a couple more times, but we knew it wasn't ready for prime time. And we put it back. And obviously for Christmas music, we're not practicing it all that often. But this past year, after 4 years, we had the right band, we had the right temperament, we had the right musicians, and we performed it at all 3 gigs, and it went real well. So sometimes you got to have the patience to grow whatever you're trying to grow. But to me, it's very, very important to know what the end game looks like. There's too many people that they talk about the process. And, when you're paying for a sales organization, some of the deals that I had to source, I'd be putting out a couple $100,000 because I'd have development people there and engineering and salespeople, and we're flying all over the world and all this kind of stuff. And, when I look at any salesman, the second best thing to do in any kind of deal is pull out early if you know you're not going to win. So typically, you're not going to win if you can't picture what that last meeting was going to look like. Who signs? Where is it going to be signed? A lot of times you're trying to get year-end business, and I hear invariably, "Are you sure the guy's going to be in the office between Christmas and New Year's?" And geez, I never thought of that. A lot of guys take vacation then. If that's the guy that's going to sign, you better start saying, "Hey, I'll be there on December 30th. I've missed a lot of New Year's Eves. I missed a lot of birthdays. I've missed a lot of anniversaries. My wife understood that. I was lucky enough to retire at 59. But to me, it's extremely important to be where you need to be to give the customer the best possible service.
I love what you're talking about here because it's so powerful.
We had a deal down in for the band down in Navy Pier. I know you know it well. I doubled our highest rate we've ever charged. The person there jumped on it. I'm like, Jesus, I came in too low. One of the challenges I got in the band, there's no price leader out there. I have no idea what we can charge. And it turns out our band is probably getting more money than there's about 4 or 5 other bands that I know them well enough that we're comparing notes. But here we're going in making all this money and this kind of thing. We're playing a Navy Pier. How it's got to be our best gig and a lot of fun. And they're doing a fundraising, and it's a $500 a plate dinner and all of this stuff. I didn't ask the right questions. And what's funny was I asked the band if we could go and do that exact same gig for the same amount of money, maybe even a bit more money, would you want to do it? And invariably the band said, no, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun for the band. We did a lot of rehearsal, not band rehearsal. We were rehearsing some of the skits they were doing. We didn't know about that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we kind of got off course. So you got to be very, very careful. Even myself as a leader kind of got wrapped up into, Navy Pier, and we're making more money than we've ever made and all that kind of stuff. If my band's not having fun, they're not going to drive an hour to rehearsal. There's just not enough money in this kind of stuff. And I think that's the same way for a sales organization. It's got to be fun. And it sometimes, even as a leader, you got to get wrapped up in your own success. And that's when I needed a boss. And unfortunately, by the time he got to me, because he was an IBMer and he was very, very successful, it was almost too late because marriages started breaking up. And they used to call me Oprah Bruce because I had 9 or 10 marital situations out of 150 that even wives were asking to make an appointment to see me. And I'm like, I'm an engineer. I don't understand this. But it really made me appreciate this ego thing is extremely important. And he can't think he's better than his family. Sometimes their own marriages are important. A lot of times, if I ever get the opportunity, I like to meet the other half of the relationship. It doesn't need to be a wife or a girlfriend, or it could be a mother, or how is the kid raised, especially with the band. Too is we're all very, very honest with each other about states of deal, states of the music, states of our family, and those kinds of things. And uh, it sometimes it's hard to be brutally honest with oneself as to what we need to do.
Yeah, that's it. You touched on a couple of things there that I think are really important. One is I think great leaders, and I consider you a great leader. Great leaders go out and ask the team, "Hey, how's it going? How did you like that gig?" And for those of you that are listening that aren't familiar, Navy Pier is a big deal in Chicago. It's a there's a thing called Navy Pier. There's a bunch of things on there. At the very end of it's this big, huge ballroom, and so that's what Bruce was referring to at Navy Pier. But the point that you made in that when you went back and asked the band, "Hey, would you do that gig again?" You're right. There was just for the as a member of the band, that perspective on that, it was just way too much time to pull that gig off, way too much hassle logistically with parking and trying to get in the venue and out of the venue and that whole shebang. And it ended up being an all-day sucker, right? For the entire band. That was an all-day sucker. The other thing that you touched on that I think is really powerful, and if you guys haven't got caught this, I want you to re-listen to what Bruce has been talking about, because what he's talked about is what he learned in his life early in his career. He's used all through his life in relationships, in leading a band, in his retirement. These basic skills, the basics he called them, that you go back to work all the time. And I think he's being very modest and humble. You talk about ego. I think you're being very modest and humble, Bruce, because people were seeking him out for marriage counseling because he's got these leadership skills and the ability to communicate. And so he could communicate with his team. He said something else that was very important. I don't want you to let go by. He made it a safe environment for people to voice their opinion. I've watched him do that plenty of times. I can tell you that I also watched him raise his voice um, at somebody when we had a band gig outside on a big trailer, and the band that was going to play after us, started putting their speakers in front of his trombone players and his saxophone players. And it's the only time I ever heard Bruce raise his voice. But so there are times when you need to use that authority, but it's very rare. And I want you to talk about something, Bruce, that you mentioned. What did you do to build that relationship with your employees and know about them?
Well, it's hard to build a relationship unless you got the opportunity to spend some one-on-one time with them and just talk and get them to talk. And your best leaders are your best listeners. And sometimes I can gab a little bit more than I need to. I've been told I'm the front man of the band that I talk too much, and I'm trying to hold it back a little bit. And I get that. And we've been to a couple different bands where it's been very successful and that kind of stuff. But no, I think people got to appreciate the fact. Number one, a lot of someone people that are going to tell you stuff, they don't they want it held in confidence. They got to be able to trust me that I'm not going to go around and say, geez, this guy uh doesn't particularly like these other three players and this kind of thing. uh Now, that's not to say sometimes you just got to be very, very tactful as far as conveying information to other people. There's some people in any organization that are loudmouths and are exaggerators, and they'll take what you say, and then all of a sudden it's blown out of proportion. And uh, you don't fail somebody more than once as far as losing their confidence in you, me, they're just not going to give you that opportunity. So you gotta know kind of when to fold them and when to hold them, kind of stuff as far as information. Um, I like to we have kids in our band, sophomores in high schools, and we was about three of us in our 70s. Um, but everybody's there kind of for the same reason. They want to make great music together. They want to grow together. I've got a couple kids that are just extremely good musicians, and they kind of inspire the band that you know to be around young kids like this that are really loving the music and that kind of stuff. So for me, I've coached probably over 800 kids in soccer, a sport I never played, including my four sons. Um, learned an awful lot about um, everybody's different, and and I don't care. I think the greatest team sport in the world, to be honest with you, is marching band. And I had two sons lucky enough to be in the Wisconsin marching band, and their leader, who retired about 85 years old a couple years ago, Mike Lacrone. Um, my older son, the band was playing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. My older son, who had graduated there 3 years after, and this guy's got 300 or 400 people in his 80s. And my older son went up and shook his hand, and Mike looked at him and said, "Cameron, how's things going?" And I'm like, he hasn't seen my son Jeff Cameron in years. And Jeff worked hard enough; he became a ranked leader, and he kind of defined himself by the marching band of Wisconsin. Got travel all over the country and this kind of stuff. And I think the point is, Mike has built trust of hundreds and hundreds of people. And I think, every time that he can give a second or two, or just, you can, when someone does something wrong, you can come down on them hard. It usually doesn't work, or give them a second chance. The most important thing is when someone makes a mistake, they got to know that they made the mistake. The quicker they figure it out on their own, and it's easy in music because there's this thing called a key signature. So a lot of the mistakes are caused because uh, of the key signature, and it's like, you know, I always look, and I have four different conductors. I got his name is JJ on the big band. I got Beth on the combo. I got Larry Rossi, who's my conductor at Bell Choir Church, and I got Joe Bloomquist, who's my conductor at the church band. And it's very, very different. They're four different guys, four different styles. But the part I love is everybody in that band would die for them. They want to play well for them.
Yeah.
And you can't read a book and say, okay, this is what my style is going to be. You got to have enough confidence in yourself to say, I'm very comfortable with who I am. I'm very caring with who you are. I came from a very diverse high school, north of New York City. Some of my best friends didn't go to my church necessarily, and didn't matter to me. We were and we're still very, very good friends. 50, 60 years later, we have one of us lives in Ireland. All the rest of us will fly to Ireland for his funeral. It's that kind of friendship. But to me, the friendships that you get out of this, and I live in a retirement community here. Most of my street here, they go out once a month. We have a neighborhood dinner, and they're all like, "How much longer are you going to do the band?" And I'm like, "It's up to the dear Lord. I'm going to give it everything I got until I can't." I said, I got 50 people I didn't even know 2 years ago. Come on.
Yeah.
And my kids, the other thing is the ability to give back to the youth. I've probably been to 25 weddings for kids that played soccer for me or basketball for me or played in my bands and this kind of stuff. And you know the one thing that I want to make sure that I talk about, um, my four sons I'd put up against anybody. They're four great, great kids. I never would hire them. I never wanted to be their boss. I bought them all a car because I didn't want them in junior year of high school thinking about cars. I wanted them to think about college. And I remember the way I was junior year of high school. Oh, when can I get a car and all this crap? And it's like, I want to take that off the table. And they've all three of them went to Big Ten schools, Purdue and Wisconsin. The other guy took him a little longer. He goes to a golf school in Florida, and now he's selling and designing golf courses across the United States. And you gotta find that passion, both in your kids, your employees, your band. Um, that passion is what drives me. Other people's passions. It's when someone's playing our lead alto will play Georgia, which is one of the most beautiful solos going, and you just look at his face when he's done. That's the stuff that kind of turns me on. And I think my band afforded him that opportunity. And when you get an applause, and you're getting more and more as you get better and better on the guitar, when the band applauds, guys in the band, your peer
Right.
group, is there anything better than that?
No, absolutely not. But at the Christmas gig when we did what was it, Christmas Baby, and a bunch of people in the band said, "Mike Louie, every time you played the solos and that, you're absolutely right. That peer feedback and to your point, the hard work that you've done has paid off when your peers, your contemporaries are complimenting you. There's nothing sweeter, and we're doing it for the passion. We could do this for probably hours, but for the sake of time, it's really clear that you're a great leader, Bruce, and you're right. You bring the love and the passion. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, just that I'm blessed to have a friend such as yourself, but I'm blessed to have a band such as our band. And when people call me boss and all this kind of stuff, I take that as a term of endearment, because I don't want to be anybody's boss.
Right,
So
right.
I think of people. There's about 7 in the band that call me boss, and it's like, I don't mind being called a boss. I just don't want to be the boss. I want to be the guy that can set up a situation so that you can play that solo at Christmas and have your peer group, which means a heck of a lot more than if I go to you and say, Louie, that's a great
Right.
solo. When you
Right.
hear it from your peer group, that's what I go for. That's the thing and same in a sales organization. You set up a situation where the fellow salespeople say, boy, that's a great deal that you just closed. It's not about the money. It's about, boy, you competed against some of the hardest companies in the world, and you've done something that we've never done as an organization, and this kind of thing. Those are the guys that I really truly enjoy working with.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, thank you very much for your time. I know you're busy and you got lots to do, but continue to do great work. And thanks for the things you're putting out into the world. I know you support a lot of youth. The band supports youth. And so thanks again for taking your time. I love you. You're a great American. You're a great band leader. And I'd like to echo right back to you. I'm truly blessed to have you in my life and call you a friend as well.
All right, Louie, love you as well. Have a great day.
Thanks again for joining us and listening to this episode of Leadership and Love. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you heard today that you can implement immediately to improve your leadership and accelerate your growth? If you've gotten value out of this episode or learned something that you can implement today, we'd ask that you please share it with those that you care about. Our goal is to create more leaders who are leading with love.